Welcome to the second video in this sequence. This is going to be about the half hour of silence, but it relates still again to section 88, which we discussed in the last video. And so we're going to do a bit of a review before we move forward into the details of the half hour silence. And to do that, we'll just kind of go back to what we discussed in this previous presentation, that section 88 and Revelation 6, 12 through 17 here are really covering the same events. And that, and so, for example, verse 87 of 88 and verses 12 and 13 of Revelation 6 are talking about the same event. Revelation 6 here defines this as something that happens in the sixth seal. Verse 14 again, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. I expect that what we're going to see when these things happen is that this will be a part of this sequence as we move forward. Verse 15 of Revelation 6 really gives us the scope of things. I mean, who's going to hear this? Who's going to know this? How many people on the earth are going to be affected? And it says the kings of the earth, which would be what? Presidents, of nations and countries. We don't think of them in kings so much in these days. And the great men and the rich men and the chief captains, every bondman, every free man, saw these things occur and hid themselves in the rocks and in the mountains and so forth. Section 88 here in these verses, tells you about the events that will unfold, that there will be, the voice of thunder, the voice of lightning, the voice of waves heaving themselves beyond their bounds, and angels flying through the mist of heaven, declaring that the bridegroom is on his way. And so that really explains why these folks over here are reacting the way that they are, why they're hiding themselves in the dens and the rocks and the mountains, and why they know that they can declare, for the great day of his wrath is come, who shall be able to stand? They know that because these events are going to unfold, and they're going to be a witness to them. And by they, if you take what verse 15 says, that really means everyone, all of us. And then paying closer attention to verse 92, we understand that this leads to the coming of the bridegroom. And that's going to be in Missouri. And so we'll have to go out to meet him. And then verse 93, and immediately there shall appear a great sign in heaven, and all people shall see it together. And what is that sign? Well, I'm going to say that's the sign of the Son of Man, because here we have this same judgment here that we do in Matthew, Joseph Smith Matthew, abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke of. And then he says, immediately after the tribulations of those days, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And what do we have over here? And immediately there shall appear a great sign in heaven, and all people shall see it together. In this slide, we compared all of this to what Joseph Smith said, that every eye would see it. And that the world at large would think that it's two comets coming together, but that the Latter-day Saints would really understand what's going on. So, and then we discussed how, after this happens, after the bridegroom comes, after he comes to the saints in Missouri, or at that time, that's the opening of the seventh seal. And right here in verse 95, we said before, that represents that 21 years. And it'll happen after all these things happen and after the angels declare the destruction that has come upon, let's say, the wicked among the Gentiles. And so that completes our intro or review. And so let's get into the half hour of silence. To do that, we just go to Revelation. And Revelation 1, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Okay. So we're going to see these seven angels with seven trumpets. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that there's a sequence, that there's order here, and this is how things are going to happen when the seventh seal opens and the half-hour silence begins. So these seven angels, which had the seven trumpets, are preparing themselves to sound. We're still in chapter 8, 7, when we see the first angel sounded. The next verse, the second angel sounds. And in verse 10, the third angel sounds. And of course, with each of these angels sounding their trumpets, certain events unfold. We're still in Revelation 8, and we're already here to the fourth angel sounding. And in verse 13 it says, and I beheld, I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumps of the three angels which are yet to sound. So what he's saying is, the first four angels are kind of an introduction, and the last three angels are each woes. So angels 5, 6, and 7 are woes. They're something, I'd say, at another magnitude. We get into Revelation 9, and the fifth angel sounded. And of course, excuse me, you read through all of these things that happen here after the fifth angel sounds. But one thing that we learn is that these events take up 5 months. So we know that it's been at least 5 months since the half-hour silence began and the seventh seal was opened, don't we? And he says, one woe is past, behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter. In verse 13, the sixth angel sounds. Okay? And what's interesting about this is, besides the events that unfold, which we're not going to get into those events so much until we get to a little further down the road here, but we know that that there's an hour and a day and a month and a year involved here. So we've got 13 months. We'll just round that off. We won't worry about the hour and the day so much. But we also had an event that was 5 months. And so we're up to a total of 13 months worth of events, aren't we? Then we get to Revelation 11. And this chapter is really where the coming of the Lord to the Jews really is explained. In as much as it doesn't give us, a lot of details about the seventh woe. But it says, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread underfoot 40 and 2 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And so this is the siege which Gog and his army of 200 million lay against Jerusalem. And notice that we've got a time assigned here of 42 months. And so, now we've got 5 months, 13 months, 42 months. We're up to 60 months, or 5 years worth of events. And so, you got this must cause you to sort of scratch your head if you were believed that the sixth seal was opened in or the seventh seal rather was opened in the year 2000 and the half-hour silence began, because we didn't see this happen in the first 5 years, from 2000 to 2005. We didn't see it in the first 7 years. We didn't see it in the second 7 years. And we're in the third 7 years. And, if you're one of those who puts a date of April 6th on it, we're only a few months away from that. And none of these events have unfolded. So, how do you explain that? The only way I can explain it to you is to say, the opening of the seventh seal is still in the future. We're going to have these judgments. The Christ is going to come. The sign of the Son of Man is going to be given. He's going to come to Missouri. This angel will sound his trumpet, and declaring that of the destruction that had come upon the great and abominable church. And the seventh seal will open at that time. The half-hour silence will begin, and there it is, right there. So, sorry to say, but if you're one of those who believes we're in the seventh seal, John doesn't agree with you. You have to be willing to, tear those pages out of your Bible and say, no, that doesn't apply. Because I am so darn sure that we're in the seventh seal. Continuing on with Revelation 11, we read about the two candlesticks, or these two prophets are, symbolized as two candlesticks. And, all of the events, that happen in these verses. And then, we go on through verses 8 through 14. Their dead bodies lie in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days, symbolic of the 3.5 years of the 42 months, and then in 14, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And then in verses 14 through 19, this pretty much ends the chapter for us. The seventh angel sounds, and we learned that the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. Excuse me. And so it doesn't give us a lot of detail. If you want the details of what happens, then you need to go to Ezekiel and see what he tells you about the destruction that comes upon Gog and his army of 200 million. And you gain more insights in D&C 45 as well. But all of these things transpire, and something that has to happen, before this happens, is that Israel has to be gathered. And so I'm going to say that this whole period from the opening of the seventh seal and the beginning of the half-hour silence until he comes to the Jews is going to be 7 years. And in that time, not only will these events, characterized by these 7 angels sounding their trumpets, unfold, but Israel will be gathered, and they'll be gathered to Zion in preparation for the Lord's coming to the Jews, which we get here in chapter 11 of Revelation. And so that's also, that gathering of Israel is also a part of the half-hour silence, and perhaps we'll cover that another time, in another video. But I hope you have learned something. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.